Hello everyone, my name is John Bussard. I'm an HPE Business Transformation Center engineer for Ingram Micro. I help support HPE servers, blade systems, storage, as well as Aruba networking technology solutions. In my videos, what I like to do is show you a slide from a popular PowerPoint and then demonstrate to you what that means within a management context. Today, we're going to do an unboxing of a Proliant DL380 Gen 10 Plus system. Now the Gen 10 Plus systems are going to coexist alongside the Gen 10 systems, but what I want you to think of with the Gen 10 Plus systems is higher performance capabilities. For example, not only does this DL380 Gen 10 Plus system have third generation of Intel scalable Xeon processors, but we have other technologies that allow it to be able to have a more enhanced performance capability. So things like 8-channel mode of DDR4 3200 memory, enhanced NVMe support, 4th generation of PCI Express slots. NVMe, I think, is a big thing within these systems. We have support for tri-mode controllers, and that's controllers that can support not only SAS, SATA, but also NVMe drives, as well as RAID support for NVMe. So that's all nice. NVMe is certainly the highest performance solutions. And when we open up this system, you're going to see a lot of great Intel technologies. So things within the Optane family, so things like SSD drives, Intel Optane SSD drives, Intel Optane NVMe drives, as well as Intel Optane persistent memory, the 200 series flavor of persistent memory. If you don't know what persistent memory is or Intel Optane PMEM is, you can use this in two modes. You can use it in app mode as well as memory mode. Within app mode, it'll act like very fast storage, persistent storage that'll survive a reboot of a system. Right, and it's connected to the memory bus, which is the fastest bus you'll have inside your compute environment. Right, so very fast memory. It'll come up like a drive letter, like for example, if in Windows you could bring it up as a D drive or whatnot. You could also use this memory in memory mode, right, and that'll act like just regular memory in a system. So why use this over traditional DDR4 memory? Well, you can get larger sticks of RAM at a reduced cost. So for example, right, with Intel Optane persistent memory, you can get 512 gig sticks. You can't even come close to that with traditional DDR4 memory. Also, it's less expensive, and I'm not necessarily a pricing person, but I would say for a little more than what you could get a 64 gig stick of DDR4, you can get a 128 gig stick of Intel Optane persistent memory. So you can get large amounts of memory at a much lower cost. As a matter of fact, the system I'm going to show you is going to have 2 terabytes of memory installed. And we're going to use that to be able to support a virtual desktop environment, a VDI environment. And this is going to allow us to be able to support power users by giving them a large amounts of memory per virtual desktop in their environment. So there'll be a lot of great Intel technologies. And I shouldn't forget, there's also Intel E810 network adapters, and these come in 2-port as well as 4-port flavors. And they support 10 gigabit or 25 gigabit. So 25 gigabits becoming more and more popular in servers as time goes by. So certainly we'll have those installed on this system as well. So with all that being said, let's unbox this system and take a look at the components. Alright, so here's the box for our DL380 Gen 10 Plus system. As always, I kind of sliced the box open, took a look inside, but this should be the experience that you get when you open this up. Now this is a CTO build, so some things might be a little bit different, but this is pretty typical of what I've seen from HPE servers. So the first thing I like to point out are these heavy power cables that we have over here. So these are mainly used for DC power connections on the system. I'll show you the power supplies with these guys. This would have a safety grade power connector on there if you happen to deal with those type of things. All right, but that's what those cables are. Back here, we have our front panel connector, and I'll put that on when we get to the front of the server itself. And here we have our rails. Pretty standard rails if you worked with HPE servers, nothing too great. They're pretty durable. All right, we got some foam over here. Foam over here. Pull that out. And a little bit of packing up front here to protect the front of the server. And then over here we have our ILO license. So sometimes they send this as an envelope in the server. Sometimes you get this through email. But this time it came inside the box. Alright, so this is pretty heavy, so let me pull this guy on out and we'll continue. Alright, so here's the top of our Proliant DL380 Gen10 Plus server. This server is based off Intel Xeon Generation 3 scalable processors. Now to get in this guy, we just got to pull this lever back a little bit. Alright, we take off the cover, and then obviously on the inside, on the top, is this nice sticker to show you where all the common layout is. Right, I find that pretty handy when I work with this system. Now anything that's in purple, alright, that will be hot pluggable. So while the server's running, I can go over here and pull out this fan if you wanted to. And I'm showing this mainly because this is a max performance fan. So there's a lot of high performance components you're going to find with this server that's been configured that way. Alright, so these are a little bit different than the stock fans that are out there. Alright, so this has got the purple connection as opposed to the blue. Alright, and I wouldn't want to do something like this while the server was on. Alright, it's because blue means cold pluggable. Alright, but I can pull out the entire fan tray pretty easily. Even the air baffle has these little blue tabs on them as well. Alright, so when I look at the inside of this system, I have two drive cages configured. One of these drive cages is pretty much a traditional SAS connection. Right, if you've done servers, for a while, you'll recognize that connection. Over here, something maybe a little less familiar. Right, this would be the NVMe connection, the second cage over here. I don't know if you can see it, but down there is the new hybrid hybrid capacitor. So that would be to protect your data on your RAID controller in case of accidental failure of the system. So protect in-flight data. Right, and you can see that this cable wraps all the way around to the controller that I have back there, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. I also have the high performance heat sinks on these Intel Xeon scalable processors. Again, they're Generation 3 scalable processors. They have a radiator back here, a bunch of radiators back here, and obviously these fans would keep them nice and cool. I don't know how well it comes across, but these fans are also notched. These heat sinks are also notched here. That's basically if you put video cards in there, you're not knocking into the heat sinks. You can probably tell the system is loaded with memory. Right, so 16 of them, because I have a couple different types of RAM in this. So 16 of them are going to be your traditional server-based DDR4 modules. So this is the 32 gig. So I got 512 gigs total of this system. So that's traditional RAM. But I also have in this system is this type of RAM as well. So this is a 128 gig stick of Intel Optane 200 series persistent memory, or what will sometimes be called PMEM. There's a couple different ways you could use this PMEM option. So I've got 16 of these. That makes 2 terabytes of memory. Now these 128 gig sticks of Intel Optane P memory are a lot less expensive than the traditional RAM counterparts. A lot less expensive. So getting the 2 terabytes of RAM is not too difficult. Now basically what happens is if I put this memory in memory mode, the system will boot up with all this RAM installed and it'll see 2 terabytes. And it'll use these 32 gig sticks of traditional DDR4 RAM as kind of a cache for this. All right, but it's a it's a pretty good way, a pretty inexpensive way of getting to 2 terabytes as opposed to buying larger RAM modules. You can get larger stick size of these memory modules as well if you need more memory. I'm going to use this probably in a VDI environment, and I'm probably going to give my virtual desktops a healthy size of virtual memory. So highly recommended. Look into that. A great way to get lots of RAM inside a server. You can also use this memory in app mode. All right, and basically that's like connecting very fast storage to the memory bus. So if you put this in app mode, you can boot up your system, something like Windows. It'll look like another drive within your environment. All right, you can format it out, and that information that'll be on that will survive a reboot of a system. All right, so 2 different modes. There's app mode, act like very fast storage, and there's memory mode, which gives you a way to within your systems without a lot of cost. Okay. Over here, this is USB connectors. So I'm going to pull this out. There's a cable that goes out to the front. I'll show you that when we get there. But here is an HPE 32 gigabyte micro SD RAID 1 USB boot device. Alright, so I'm going to do vSAN on the system. I'm going to boot my hypervisor off of this. Right. So this has 2 SD cards in it, so there's one of them. Alright, the nice HP green. Alright, and for redundancy, there's a second one over here, and this just sets up a RAID 1 by itself. And there's the secondary SD card. So I'm protected, even my boot device is protected. Alright, next, let's take a look at the secondary riser here. Alright, so these are blue, so I take and twist those. I can pull this out while the server's off. Now this riser has 2 8X slots. PCI Express 8X slots, so one here and one in the back, and the one in the middle is a 16X slot. Now I have a high performance Intel E810 network adapter installed in this system, and we could see the SFP ports back here. Actually, I should say SFP 28 ports, because this network adapter not only does 10 gig, but it also does 25 gig. And I have another one of these network adapters installed in this slot, so I'll show you that when we get over there. So let me set this aside. Now, instead of having onboard network adapters that you may or may not use, but we are now using an OCP slot. So this actually is another Intel E810 network adapter. All right, but I'm not using any of my valuable PCI Express slots in this, and this will kind of be in lieu of the onboard network controllers, because who knows if you're going to use those. It's nice to have them configurable. Again, we got the 2 SFP slots over here, SFP 28, and then we've got the OCP connector, which I guess is more of an industry standard nowadays. And there's the bottom. While we're talking about not wasting valuable PCI Express slots with the OCP slot, we also have an AROC connector here, and you could put on here a hardware-based RAID controller if you wanted to. I don't have one of those cards installed because we're going to be doing vSAN, right? And you don't necessarily want to use those type of controllers in your environment. All right, so let's take out this primary riser over here. Same way. Pull that out, and I want to be careful of these cables a little bit here. I also want to plug this cable up here. Now this cable here is to connect to my backup protection for this RAID controller. All right, so that goes over to the hybrid capacitor that's up front here. So you want to keep that plugged in. So let me set this down and pull out this card here. All right. So this card is a microchip based smart array adapter. This is an SR930P. Alright. So this cable is what's running the NVMe drives. This is actually a tri-mode controller. So this is both supports SAS, SATA, as well as NVMe. Right, this has 32 lanes. It also has 8 gigabytes of cache on it. All right, so this is probably the nicest controller that they have in the portfolio right now. All right, so I'm going to take and we're going to set that over here. And let's take a look at the Intel network adapter. So this one is a traditional E810. It's in a PCI Express slot. All right, so I'll give you a good look at that. All right, again, it's a dual port adapter. All right, high performance, 10 gig, 25 gig. So this server has lots of connectivity in it. Now, one thing I'm going to want to point out is my secondary cage is connected through this NVMe cable. My SAS cables here run through and they're connected to the onboard controller that's down there. Alright, so so it's nice to know I took this whole system apart without using any tools, and we've dug in this deep, so that kind of speaks volumes to the HPE solution. So let me put this all together, and let's take a look at the back of this server. Alright, so here's the back of our Proliant server here. Again, this is a DL380 Gen10 Plus server. Again, it's based on Intel Xeon Generation 3 scalable processors. So let's first look over here. So this bay was blank, so this is the primary riser we're looking at that I pulled up for you. Up here will be the Smart RAID 932P RAID controller. And if you remember, those are those bright green cables that are running all the way out to the front U.2 drive bay. Right. And then up here is our Intel E810 high performance network controller, network adapter. All right, so this guy has 2 SFP ports. I should say SFP 28 ports supporting 10 gig and 25 gig. And if I go over here, this would be the secondary riser here. If you remember, both these were blank, but up on top here, I had another E810 Intel network adapter, right? High performance network adapter installed in here. And even if we go all the way down to the bottom, right here, this is going to be the OCP slot. Right? Remember, in lieu of the onboard network adapter, we have a customizable adapter and an OCP slot. And again, we had installed the E810 high performance network adapter. Again, that would be 10 and 25 gig. Down below here, we have a VGA port. And then over here, we have, that would be the ILO port for the baseboard management controller. If you don't use ILO, I highly recommend it. It's completely amazing. And then right here are 2 USB ports. Now finally, let's take a look at our power supplies. And if you remember from the unboxing, I showed you those thick power cables because the system can certainly support DC power. Right? So we're looking at high voltage DC, so like 277 volts plus. So these have different connectors on them. So let me pull out this power supply. But it looks pretty typical, right? Looks like something you'd see in a traditional power supply. All right, now this power supply is not a common power supply, I would say. You look around, everything looks familiar, right? Except for this right here. Right, and there's that connector I was talking about. So this would be a safety grid connector. And again, for high voltage DC, if you needed to support that in your environment. So again, this is not common. Normally you'd see the normal power connection on here, the normal IEC style power connection you'd see on a lot of servers in here. But I thought this was interesting to look at and show you, right? Because you don't always get to see that. Right, and there's that power supply. So let's plug that back in. Alright, so let's look at the front of the system. Alright, here's the front of our Proliant DL380 Gen10 Plus server. Alright, so in this system we have a couple drive cages as well as a universal media bay. So with this looks like we can get an optical drive up here, you can buy an option to get a couple hard drives over here. The way it stands configured, we've got a couple USB ports as well as a display port over here. We've got a little bit of an informational piece over here about our bays. We'll start over here when looking at our drive bays. So this drive bay can hold 8 small form factor drives, and if you remember, this was connected up to the onboard controller in this system. And again, we're going to do vSAN on this guy, so I'm going to use these drives as the capacity tier. We've got a couple of them over here. These are SATA SSD drives. All right, so we could look at these drives real quick. These are Intel D3S 4610 series drives, so 480 gig. All right, we can take a look at that. And I could actually look at the back. All right, and I could tell these are meant for a SAS SATA bus by the connector over here. This would be the power supply, that would be the data, but it's the center that I'm interested in. And I'll show you what I mean as we look at the other drive that's in this system. As a matter of fact, I'm going to take this and I'm going to set this down up here. Now this over here was the U.2 bay, and this was connected to our Smart RAID SR932P controller, all right, in our environment. That was that nice controller that we had. So I think it's important to note, if you look at these drives, they say U.3 on them. So these are also Intel drives. They are a Intel Optane P4800X series drive. All right, and we could take a look at that here. It's interesting because this drive's labeled up here as a P. Let's see, what does it say? A P41550 up front here. So this is a 375 gigabyte drive. All right, so this will be my performance tier in vSAN, and the other drives will be my capacity tier. All right, so let's take a look around in this so we can see that there's a nice heat sink on the back. But look here, more importantly, all right, power connector. There's some more data lines in the middle here, and there's the other data line. So let's go compare that. Let's go bring these next to each other, and you can see the little bit of difference. All right, that right there, that little bit in the center tells me that this is an NVMe drive. All right, so when you look at the drives, that's something to look at. All right, so let's put this guy back in. Let's also put this guy back in as well. So some other things. All right, we've got a power button over here, status indicators. On the top we have a USB port that's directly connected to the ILO, so you can offload log files. And down below is another USB port. And finally we have our service tag over here, and this will have your default username and password for ILO, as well as your serial number logged on it. All right, and then to complete our look on the system, we have the bezel connected in this environment. So this is our Proliant DL380 Gen10 Plus systems, again based off Intel Xeon scalable 3rd generation processors. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please stay tuned for more videos.